My name is John Passfield, and the title of this reading will be Eisenstein Video 7, The Planning Notebook. This is my novel, Death Day, The Apology of Sergei Eisenstein. In this video, I'm going to read from the planning notebook, which I wrote while planning and writing the novel. The title of the notebook is Planning Death Day. It covers a span of 3 years from the first note on the topic of a potential novel to the point where I had a complete rough draft to polish. The novel is 60,000 words and the notebook is 70,000 words. In this reading, I'm going to present 5 passages as a sample of what the Eisenstein notebook contains. I'm taking these passages from the very first note that I wrote on the topic of the proposed novel. So they all come from Thursday, April 27th, 2006. Some of these ideas held up and some of them did not. So a few hundred words from what turned out to be a 70,000 word notebook. So here's the first section, number 1. A novel on the life and artistic career of Sergei Eisenstein. I've been brooding about this while reading biography and criticism. I've worked out a structure which expresses my ideas, so it's an ABC here. A, when things go right artistically, and in brackets Potemkin, the title of a film. B, when things go wrong artistically, in brackets Mexico. So the title of an Eisenstein film, but also a location where he attempted to make the film. And C, outer frame, in brackets Apology of 1935. Perhaps the filmmakers conference in 1935 where he had to apologize and hedge as an outer frame. The apology units will be just brief progressive scenes. So the outer frame is the story, the action arc of the novel. So the outer frame would be him apologizing. Inside that, when things go right artistically, making Battleship Potemkin. When things go wrong artistically, attempting to make Que Viva Mexico, his Mexican film. Okay, passage number 2 then from the Death Day notebook. Each chapter will be a full account of the film, philosophy, and lifestyle of the time frame. Basically, it will be 2 ideas in counterpoint. So 2 dashes here, but number 1, when things go right artistically, Potemkin in brackets. Number 2, when things go wrong artistically, Mexico in brackets. The frame will be a series of short scenes, all consecutive, of Eisenstein's appearance at the 1935 Filmmakers Conference when he is forced to apologize for his deviance from the party line. It will be him getting ready in his room, almost forgetting his speech, taking a taxi, troika, through Moscow, walking, arriving at the hall, the many sideways glances or insincere greetings, the attack, and then as the final item, the beginning of his apology is a very gloomy scenario, but the point is that only sometimes do the ideal conditions for art appear, and then maybe not again for that artist. So rather dark portrait of an artist for whom things didn't always work out well. That's what I was planning. Okay, 3. Passage number 3 from the Death Day notebook. The rhythm is 1. Potemkin. Perfection of social conditions, patrons, colleagues, money, ideas, theory, improvisation, weather, etc. So everything going well. Everything that can go right will go right when art is in ascendance. The result is one more great work of art to add to the treasure trove. Well, that's number 1, Potemkin. Number 2, Mexico. Disaster. Whatever can go wrong will go wrong. The misunderstanding with Sinclair, the writer Sinclair, who sponsored him financially. The confrontations with Sinclair's brother-in-law. money shortages, weather, peasants disappearing, lack of equipment, unable to see the rushes, etc. Finally, the taking away of the film from Eisenstein and the cancellation of the film. He ends up with an aborted work of art and a sense of defeat. So that's number 2, Mexico. Okay, 3, apology. This is done objectively, with mostly physical movements and gestures. Perhaps things are said to him, which are enigmatic, in brackets. You can't fight the system. The party will prevail. I can't afford to defend you, etc., end of bracket, to give the flavor of the stifling of artistic creativity. It ends with Eisenstein beginning his apology, a note of capitulation. So there are the 3 then, Potemkin, Mexico, apology. Here's the 4th segment of the planning notebook. The tone to me, though, is, what else do you expect? To frame the story optimistically is to upset the realistic balance. How many great masterpieces are there? At what price have they been bought? How often do ideal conditions appear? To say that the ending is the point of the story is to miss the point. It is to go back inside the surround of defeat and disaster and to find the hidden gem, the completed masterpiece that reveals the meaning of the story. It is not how it ends, but what it leaves behind that is the point. Excuse me. So what I was thinking there was, excuse me again, Battleship Potemkin came early in his career, and he had other excellent films as well that he completed, but just taking those 2 films, Battleship Potemkin came early in his career, a great success. Then the Mexico Adventure, which didn't work out, came later in his career, and then his apology came even later. But to say, well, the novel ends with an artist being defeated by his society, the Soviet Society of 1935, is to forget that you go back inside the story. You don't just take the ending of the novel as the most important thing about the story. You go back inside and you find that gem, that work of art that is added to the treasure trove, not only of Soviet Russia, his homeland, but added to the treasure trove of all of society for all of time. And then you say, well, wait, it had a dark ending for the individual artist, but a very bright ending for the rest of us who haven't had to suffer what he suffered. So that's what I was getting at there. How to convey that, though, in the writing is the challenge. Okay, here's the 5th segment of the Death Day notebook. Technically, this story will use all the techniques which I've developed so far. I expect the backbone of the 2 film cycles, that'll be Potemkin and the Mexican film, to be interesting, as one is a finished masterpiece, that's of course Potemkin, Battleship Potemkin, and the other is in bits and pieces and was never edited, that's the Mexican attempt at a film. The one section was never filmed, so he had a whole section planned to film in Mexico. He never got to film it. I had the idea of just leaving this chapter blank with a note that the episode was never filmed, but we will see. Well, that'd be the first in a novel, a blank, 10 pages blank with just a note at the beginning saying this would have been the segment of the film had it been filmed. Well, I didn't do that, but an interesting idea. It will be a conjectural complex of images, but so will the entire Mexico cycle. It will be fun to summarize Potemkin as a completed film and to compile images for Mexico as fragments and conjecture, a mixture of things planned, actually filmed, and imagined. So I was going to do my own version of the images from Battleship Potemkin, which I did. I was also going to somehow come up with images from the film that was never actually made, or certainly not completed, and I did. Okay. Couple of headings. Communism, will be the dark and threatening surround, which is anti-artistic and which threatens art at all times and in all cultures, but was particularly repressive in Eisenstein's case. So I saw the communism of the Soviet Union of 1935 as a particular example of what has happened throughout the ages, that there have been repressive regimes which have squashed art as being antisocial. So communism has this particular, but there's a general theme there. Okay, the whole topic of the novel should be a rich trove of images. Now, apology is a heading. Maybe this is all in the filmmaker's conference, the physical act of sitting and listening to yourself being talked about as you sip a glass of water or look at the clock. Perhaps you might have forgotten to lock the door or to let the cat in or out. The icebox might be dripping and you can't remember whether you emptied the water out of the pan last night. You wonder whether you will ever even get to go back there to your apartment. Hopefully you can have your books to take with you, well, to prison. These inner thoughts about trivial and physical terms, in brackets, the itchy leg again. How many times can one scratch without attracting attention, end of bracket, will be accompanied by disembodied quotations about Eisenstein and his work. So as you're sitting there, think about the cat, the icebox, your books, your itchy leg. Comrade Eisenstein has shown a willfulness in pursuing strategies that are not aimed at the masses. Another voice will say, his films are no doubt brilliant, but are not in line with ... well, of course, with Soviet policy and so on. So he'll be sitting there as a real-life actual person, and he'll hear these terrible things, these accusations being said about him in loud, brutal voices. That was my plan. Perhaps these intersperse with the inner description all through the first 6 apology inter-chapters. So again, working out the structure, how many chapters of which of these 3 elements, Potemkin, Mexico, and apology. A, 5 or 6 Eisenstein items per inner chapter. B, 4 or 5 disembodied quotations of innuendo and attack. Perhaps they start with praise, and then become qualified, and then become sarcastic, and then become an attack. The premise is that we expect Eisenstein to defend himself defiantly in a Hollywood film. A person under attack would fight back, right? But this is not what most people have done over the years. The ending is not romantic, will not be romantic, as I'm planning it, but realistic. He apologizes and then says that he hopes he will be allowed to continue with his work. Perhaps this is the last line of the novel. I hope that I will be allowed to continue with my life's work. End of novel. Well, I have the novel here, but I'll just say, rather than reading it, that the end is a variation of that line. So I had that line very, very early. How to end a novel? Well, he apologizes. That might not be enough. This is his whole career. They even threatened to destroy his existing films if he didn't get in line, and certainly threatened to end his future career as a filmmaker. So the line I wanted to end with was, I hope that I'll be allowed to continue with my life's work. End of novel, and it is very similar. Okay, so 70,000 words of notebook, and I've read a couple of hundred. Okay, here's a conclusion. Here's a note that I wrote while thinking about all this. Where are we when we read a novel? Well, of course, we're sitting in an easy chair with a cup of coffee and with a reading light illuminating the page. But where else are we? Well, depends on the type of novel. If we're reading a prose novel, we're in a lecture room, sitting in the audience with a narrator speaking from the stage. The narrator is telling us about the experience of the main character of the prose novel, whose story has already happened. That's why the story is being told in the past tense. And the main character of the prose novel, if he or she is not dead, has gone on presumably to other adventures. Now, Where are we when we read a poetic novel? In an easy chair, of course, with a cup of coffee and a reading light illuminating the page. But we are not in a lecture room listening to a narrator. There is no narrator. So where are we then? Well, we are inside the mind of the main character. And the main character does not know that we are there. There's no storyteller. We are overhearing the thoughts of the main character. And these are not yesterday's thoughts expressed in prose and in the past tense. They are the thoughts of the immediate moment expressed in the present tense, and at the level of the mind, of the subconscious mind, in which thought is being generated as imagery. And because we are not privileged to move up the ladder of the consciousness-subconsciousness continuum, we will never hear the prose thoughts of the main character in past or present tense. What we will know is what we, the reader, are thinking in present tense with the imagery that is being generated at the deepest level of human thought. In short, when we read a poetic novel, we are living, for as long as we sit in the armchair, and perhaps for a long time afterwards, inside the mind of the main character. This planning notebook can be accessed for free on my website, johnpassfield.ca. And lastly, I'll just say thank you for watching this video.